evening. Thank you for joining us for the Burlington Police Commission meeting. The date is July 23rd and the time is 6:05. Item 1.2, 6 commissioners are present and we have quorum. Introducing our newest commissioner, Commissioner Dapper. It's going to take me a little time, Commissioner. I'm going to practice it in front of the mirror a few times. I'm going to get it. Welcome to you. Commissioner Oski is absent and working in Tanzania for the next 3 weeks. We wish her well from afar. Also present is Chief Murad. Item 1.3 is the modification of the agenda. Are there any motions to change or modify the agenda? Hearing none, is there a motion to accept the agenda?
Motion to accept.
Mr. Comerford, is there a second? Mr. Garrison, all in favor of the approval of the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Item 2 is approval of minutes from the June meeting of the commission. Any changes? Hearing none, is there a motion to accept the minutes? Is there a second? Mr. Garrison?
I'll second.
Okay. Okay, he has to abstain. Sorry. A second from Commissioner Cox. All in favor of the approval of the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Commissioner Garrison abstains. Item 2 is, item 3 is public forum. Do we have anyone online?
We have no persons in person. We do have a number of individuals online. First with hand raised is Councilor Grant.
Okay. Item 3 is public forum. As in every meeting, I request that you keep your comments civil and address your comments to the commission as a whole and be cognizant of the commission's time. Thank you. Commissioner Grant, Councilor Grant.
Hi, thank you. I still answer to both, believe it or not. I'm going to try to go as quickly as possible, although I do have a number of notes. I am the chair of the Public Safety Committee, the City Council's Public Safety Committee, and this past Thursday at our July 18th meeting, we had a presentation from the recruitment team. I admire them greatly, and I admire the work that they are trying to do under difficult circumstances. It became clear to me and the 2 other counselors that are on that committee that that recruitment team needs more support in terms of we need to be actively pursuing ways to drive more applications. The number of applications coming in are simply too low to rebuild the department the way that we do. I am planning to put forth, I've started discussions about putting forth a subcommittee on recruitment to work on branding, to work on a strategic social media plan to improve. Like right now, if people were to Google our department and to Google our city, it might not seem to be a place where they want to work. And we all know that there are positive reasons why people should be willing to come to work here in Burlington. So I will be, once I get that resolution together and it gets approved, I will be coming to the commission again, asking to see if any commissioners would be interested in being involved in this subcommittee. I recommend watching that meeting and watching the presentation. It was extremely informational, especially with regards to the challenges. I think that's something that's important for all of us to understand and be talking about at the police commission level and the public safety and council level. Minor request to see if we could get more details on your minutes, if at all possible. With regards to talking to the public about CSOs, the community service officers, CSLs, the community support liaisons, and the CAPE program, the crisis advocacy intervention programs, it would be great to include the public. These positions, some of which had the origin, but due to strong public feedback and desire from stakeholders from all levels in the city, we saw a need to increase the number of these positions and to create what is now CAPE and what is now CARES. So I think when we talk about these things, we have to talk and include the fact that these are community-driven responses. I just want to express a concern about the priority response plan. I am a Central District City Councilor. As a reminder, this is wards 2 and 3. So that includes the downtown, and which is an area where most of our businesses operate. And there is a widespread feeling that this priority response plan has collapsed in a way because there is not only no response when officers aren't available, people are being actively told not to call, especially around retail theft. And that is of grave concern to me. Going to the chief's report and looking at the data is page 10, 11, 12, 13, and after that, when we look at the aggregated larceny and retail theft in this idea of lack of reporting, I have to give the feedback that literally people are being told not to call. So this idea of a lack of reporting or a reduction in this happening, I just want to say is not, I don't feel that's a fair representation of what's going on. I also have talked about the issues with the South End box stores. I do feel that, yes, we've had a lot of reports from the South End box stores. They are bigger businesses. And yes, they had far more online reports, which they were directed to do. Remember, they were directed to submit those reports online. Then somehow there was language that kind of punished them for that. They are still businesses in our community, and what happens to them does matter. And so that's because they're not downtown doesn't mean, no matter how inadvertently that's what is happening to them, should be dismissed. It's still part of the numbers. If those stores were to suddenly close, that would affect our area. They do bring people to our area, and people might start there and then come downtown. They might come downtown to other stores. They might come down to have, lunch or dinner. So I do appreciate, as we continue to talk about theft across all businesses, that we don't single out the box stores as if it was negative. Just a couple of other things. Page 19, the data around the state's attorney's office, that is of grave concern to me. I don't think that's appropriate, because what are we trying to do? We're trying to show data that's meant to educate our community. And this doesn't actually do anything to educate the community about the resolution of cases. We don't know what that number means. It's kind of in a vacuum. Other counties have it high, other counties have it low. What's the difference? How does each county handle it? What is the percentage of people that might have pled guilty to something? We don't know. So I think that this is I just think we have to be very careful about constantly blaming. There's always this blame game with the state's attorney's office. And it has been stated publicly and publicly by the new mayor multiple times that the relationship between the state's attorney's office and Burlington Police Department needs to improve. And I don't believe including something like this that's really taken out of context without enough information to really to say what it is. And I would love to have the state's attorney weigh into it. And I do plan to reach out to her when she comes back from vacation as to what this actually means and what's the comparison between Chittenden County and the other counties. Otherwise, it's just another attempt to make it look like that office isn't doing anything, which is not true. So when we choose data, we have to really say to ourselves, what are we trying to accomplish here in a positive way that is meant to inform the people of Burlington? I just want to say regarding NACOL, I would be curious, and maybe someone can send me an email if the commissioners are still members of NACOL and have been participating in any of these webinars. I started thinking about this as we started looking at the oversight and accountability and what was coming out of the committees, which regretfully was only slightly better than nothing. I still voted for it, but it did make me a little physically sick. I was really disappointed because we're not making the progress that we need. Looking at the report for the department, I will be going into that in more detail. I don't have anything that I want to add at this time, but I do continue to be concerned that the police commission's own report from last year was never done, and there's not been a report from this year done, and that is crucially just so important. So if you can continue to say what resources you need in order to get this done, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you very much for your time. If you have any questions about anything that I brought up, please feel free to reach out to me through my city email address. Happy to talk on the phone or have an in-person meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Grant. Tim, is there anyone else who wishes to address the commission?
If any members of the public who would like to address the commission, if you could please raise your hand and I'll unmute you. Seeing none at this time.
Okay. Next on the item is Chief's report.
Hi, thank you so much for having me here tonight. Always a pleasure to be with the Police Commission. I have a Chief's report. So the Chief's report covering July is up here. Great, thank you. It starts with a terrific photo taken by Shantan Chen at the waterfront for the 3rd of July. You see there the mayor addressing our roll call on the 3rd of July. It was a large roll call. Basically, everybody that we got was there that was not otherwise going to be either had already been working during the day or had to work midnight or the next day. We brought everybody in for that evening shift and worked with a lot of other partners as well. We've got tons of acronyms there from the fire department to Green Mountain Transit to the Vermont State Police who sent a team. And all very important partners for making certain that we had a really safe and wonderful night. Next.
Just a second. I realized that I was mis-sharing the screen, so I believe that's why Councilor Grant has their hand raised. So there we go.
Okay. That's the photo that we see there. This is the next page. We were at the beginning of July, as of July 1st, we were at 67 officers. We are actually a little bit higher than that right now because yesterday I met with 4 new police recruits, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. Next, please. Thank you. Again, this is as of July 15th. That previous slide is always the 1st of the month. Those are snapshots that go back many years. And so I keep consistent with that. This is always on the 15th, which is as close as I can get strong data for these meetings that usually happen within a couple of days of the 15th. And so I use the mid of the month both for this page and also for the data about crime that follows, or incident volume rather, that follows on some other pages. You'll note here a couple of things that I think are worth saying to the commission. We only have 1 special assignment currently. That is because I have reassigned the domestic violence prevention officer to patrol, and I have reassigned the narcotics officer to patrol. That's not the narcotics team. We have narcotics detectives, including a member of the DEA task force, but we also have an officer position, not a detective position, but an officer who sits with the narcotics team, I believe for 8 months at a time, but I'd have to double check on that. I believe it is 2 tours at a time. The officer who is currently assigned, it's a terrific opportunity. Gets an officer off the road. He gets that officer an opportunity to learn what the detective unit does and what the narcotics unit does. But we were simply too short-staffed. We lost an officer. We are losing a sergeant this week. We had to serve the patrol, and that meant reassigning both those positions. Both of those are positions that I hope to have reassigned to the officers who were previously in them sometime in October, I'm hopeful, as we get some new people on board. And as we, see, as hopefully the summer months are always a little bit busier. We also, of course, have our 5 community service officers or CSOs, and we have 5 community support liaisons. And we are working hard on getting them to 6. Next, please.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So for the DV work, how is that going to get covered?
Well, officers can do DV work themselves. And of course, the initial catch of any domestic violence case is patrol. We have a domestic violence victims advocate that is a civilian or professional position. She's going to be absorbing a lot of this. Follow-up casework is going to have to be done by the officers who originally catch it on patrol. It's not as effective as having an assigned DVPO. But that position is one that is in the positions listed in the contract as being a reassignable position if we get below a certain number.
Get you that, I have the same concern as Commissioner Comerford, because in the past, when we have looked at the statistics, we have been very successful in sort of containing some of these DV incidents. When you take away resources from that area, I wonder if we'll see a spike. And that's what I'm
Yes.
concerned about.
I do too.
Prepared by DV, I think that's something we may want to really think about in terms of signing.
Yep, I wonder if we will see that spike too, but we have,
Yeah.
but the fact is that we have seen domestic violence, at least reported domestic violence, drop quite a bit over the last couple of years. And that is a rationale for reassigning the position temporarily as well.
So what would the officer doing the DV work actually do?
Meaning,
I'm wondering what the difference is between what the DV person actually does. Now they're reassigned versus a CSO or a CSL. Do they go to the door when something, are they called immediately when there's an issue?
well, CSOs have nothing to do with domestic violence at all. CSOs don't do crime work and they don't do.
So that's what I'm asking. I'm trying to differentiate between what the officer would do versus a social worker.
Well, generally the need there is that there have to be orders produced, TROs. There is a certain amount of potential for arrest that has to happen. That's why there is a domestic violence prevention officer.
I'm getting that. That's all I need to know.
Okay, great, awesome. The next, thank you. 5 CSOs, 5 CSLs. We have a CSL in background right now. So I'm hopeful to be able to have that number be 6, maybe even by the August Chiefs report. Next, please. This is the priority response plan. Again, this is here as something just, you all know it. It's here for anyone who is seeing this document for the first time, or when you send it out to members of the public if they look at it, and shows all of the different incidents to which we respond. Next, please. A graphic of how the plan works. When you start a shift with 5 and you use 1 to a priority 3, when it starts and nobody is involved in any incident, every single incident gets a response. But that can change quickly. One officer goes off to a priority 3 because we don't care whether it's priority 3 or priority 1 when we have 5 available. 2 of the remaining 4 then go off to a domestic assault. That is when the priority response plan now goes into effect. Because we always send 2 to a domestic plus a supervisor. That leaves 2. Those 2 remaining are not going to go to new calls that are priority 3s, larceny from a building, vandalism. They are waiting to be available in case there is a life safety priority 1 incident that occurs. If no such incident occurs before other officers are done with their calls for service, the officer involved in that retail theft, for example, finishes, then we're back to 3, and we don't have to wait for a robbery. We'll go to the next incident of vandalism. And that includes the ones that are stacked. If they are stacked, then they should be getting a response. However, the call volume and pace generally means that once something is stacked, it often does not get a response immediately. It is, once you're in the priority model, it's hard to get out in the course of a shift. Shifts become very busy very quickly. Next, please.
Chief, we do have a raised hand from Commissioner Cox.
Okay.
I was just going to compliment whoever it is that prepared this graphic. I think it's a wonderful graphic. It really explains exactly how it all works. And it's much more clear to me than anything that we've had before. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you. Incident volume, we are up 3% as of the 15th compared to the previous years to date. We're up a total of 5% since 2019, so 2024 is higher than it has been for about half a decade. We are our staffed call volume has gone down from previous years, but it's still about 12%. And our online reports have drastically dropped. We have really been able to minimize the number of onlines. That comes in part from strongly clarifying what can and should be online or not. If we were to go back to and I don't need to, but if we were to go back to the priority response plan drawing that shows all of the incidents, that's the exact same plan that was introduced in May of 2021 initially, and then updated in May of 2022. And the incidents that are labeled online on that are the same they have always been. But there was a period where dispatchers were, I think, referring people to online reporting for retail thefts and larcenies, which they should not have done. What I have not had any complaint of or proof of are people saying in a way that I can check into and prove that people are telling them to still go online for certain kinds of things that they're not supposed to go online for, or that they are saying, don't call for this. I find that to be, until I have proof of it, something of a slander on the men and women in the ECC. Because when we do look into cases of what is said or not, we find much more nuanced responses. And the notion that somebody's saying, don't call for this is simply not something that I have evidence of. I'm happy to look into evidence for it. And if anyone has a complaint of that kind, I want them to make that complaint so that we can, in fact, examine it and listen to the tape. But the idea that they are saying this, that is repeated often by some parties, is simply not based in any evidence at this time. Next, please.
Chair Rao, you do have a hand raised from Councilor Grant as well as from Commissioner Cox, if you would like to recognize either of
I'll
those.
let Commissioner Cox go first, and then Councilor Grant can get in at the end of the chief's report when everybody has some questions. Commissioner Cox.
Thank you. I was just curious as to, I mean, I can understand why the incidents went down during the pandemic because a lot of people were not out on the street when it was during the shutdown periods. But I was wondering about the numbers as compared to population growth. And I know that we have had population growth in the last few years. It seems like there's a lot more people now here in Burlington than there used to be. And I was wondering if at some point, maybe like for next month or something, that the number of incidents could be compared to the population to get a better idea of how that works together.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. I don't think that the city's population has increased by 5%, but I do think that there has been population movement. I think that may be a question too for Nancy Stetson in the next presentation, who is dialed into our population movement and keeps pretty good track of census and census projections.
But I think the question, I think Commissioner Cox is also saying, which I've noticed, having lived in Burlington almost 30 years now, is we are seeing a lot more visitors than we did prior to 2020. I mean, I don't think it would require, though I respect data analysts, for us to know that we have seen an influx of even visitors. And I wonder if there is a correlation between the expansion of not only populations who live here, but also people who visit. Yeah. And if we can somehow parse that out, but that only means that we need even more resources as we have more visitors coming into the city. Sorry, I interrupted.
No, I know you didn't know.
So that would be, I think, I don't know, Commissioner Cox, that's what you had in mind, but that we need to be cognizant of that as well.
Also the growth of drugs. Right?
Then there are other factors.
Yeah, there's a constellation actually of things that could rise to this kind of result.
Next, thank you. So these are the sort of selected Valcourt incidents that we track. Some good news is that for the year, overdose is slightly down. But the last couple months have not been great, and we've seen some upticks. I think the last couple months have been worse than last year over the last couple months, but the year to date at least is down. We see, some other trends there that are problematic. Domestic assault, however, you'll note is quite a bit lower, and has been trending down, over the past, several years. And that too was a factor in the temporary reassignment of the DBPO. Next, please.
Ask another question.
Yeah.
Do you think the less number of people who will be in incidents with around drugs, is that in your mind more people engaging, or is it the same people repeating?
What do you mean around drugs? Is that,
So I mean,
drugs on the previous slide?
yeah,
Can you go back, please? You mean overdose?
overdose is one, but in general, thinking about what's happening in the city around drug abuse, is it that there are more people engaging in drugs, and or is it a matter of the same individuals time after time after time?
Well,
Or both?
as we're going to see, the drugs are actually not, that are not up from previous years, over at least over a 10-year span. And that's a slide that comes in a little bit later. I think drug calls are actually, they're up from the immediate years, but they're lower than they've been in other previous years. So I think that overdose, and I think I've said this before, I do think that our overdose numbers, particularly in 2023, but also extending into this year, are, I know that they are very different than other agencies or reporting entities in Chittenden County. In other words, those entities did not see the increase that we saw in overdose. Remember, overdose is not fatal. These are overdoses that are responded to and either reversed or treated or determined maybe overdose, but not, or they're incidents in which the fire department or the police are told, leave me alone by the person. But something made a caller call it an overdose, but it's not a fatal. It's fatal, it goes to our untimely death category, and it only becomes officially an overdose once the ME gets involved, and that's usually got a 2 plus 6 month lag. Overdose here is people who live. The other agencies in Chittenden County have not seen nearly this kind of massive spike in overdose. They have, however, seen spikes in fatalities that actually exceed ours. And so what that says to me is that the usage is not necessarily different in these communities. It says that, in fact, overdoses that lead to fatality are more common in some of the other localities, although that can be impacted by a lack of immediate emergency resource or, more rural ambulance services having to get farther out and bring somebody back in to the city for treatment. But it also says to me that because our overdoses and because our drug use is so public and is in open air public spaces, it is observed by people at a far greater rate. Frankly, if you are in Jericho and you are shooting up in a home, you are not going to be noticed. And that overdose that you experience that is a non-fatal overdose may very well be one from which you revive, you come around. Most of these are not necessarily going to be fatalities. We reverse as many as we can with Narcan, but that doesn't mean that we avoided 235 deaths. Many of these would have ameliorated themselves, even without treatment. Now, I'm not suggesting that we don't respond and treat. We don't, however, as police respond to all of these anymore. The fire does go to all of them. We won't go unless there is some other aspect of criminality, or if it's in a barricade or a situation where fire can't make entry easily, like a car. But open air use, a person on a park bench that a passerby is concerned about and reports it as an overdose. I don't think that, a lot of times I don't think they are overdoses in a medical sense. And I also think that they are driven by people's concern and the very conspicuous public nature of it, as opposed to that kind of higher incident. Because although fatalities are up and tell us that, yes, usage must be up, certainly either the potency of the drug supply or the fragility of the people who are using, some combination of that has changed. It hasn't changed nearly like this. I mean, if this had occurred, we would be seeing 40. If this were commensurate with if the rate of overdose were commensurate with the rate of fatality, we'd see 40 or 50 fatalities, and we did not.
So the question I think Commissioner Comerford had is there any way for you to know that of the 235, are those 235 or 200 different overdose individuals?
Oh, my-
Or are we
No, we
talking
know,
about,
we know for a fact that's not the case. We know for a fact that, there are, I would say about a third of overdoses are related to the same small portion of individuals.
I think that we answered really well. I want you to think so.
Yeah, sorry.
It's okay.
Next slide. So these are aggregated larcenies. You see that there was a steady uptick, and this is only through the end of 2023. So it does not, this is not year to date in 2024, which most of the other data has been. This is through 2023, and you'll see that both in 2021, 2022, and 2023, aggregated larcenies really took off from the previous years. It's a striking trend. But retail theft, next slide, please, is even more striking. Retail theft deviated tremendously in 2023. Just really went off the chart. Next, please. And this breaks that down by area. And here we do see that there is a pronounced difference in the south end of town, which is where there are larger box retailers. And that really is what drove. And you'll also see on the columns on the left that it was online reporting that created a lot of that. We went from having fractional cases of online reporting to a skyrocket in 22 and 23. That was the fault of the agency. We did not, it was never, retail theft was never intended to be an online report as part of the priority response plan, but it somehow became it, and we didn't notice it or catch it in a timely fashion. However, the notice that the idea that there's been language that is punished the south end for this, I object to a bit. I do not believe that's the case. We do have a different situation here. We have professional loss prevention staffers who come in and bundle large numbers of reports and do it. If we move to the next slide, now we are looking at year-to-date data, and we're looking at data that is, you can see that significant drop off from 23 to 24 for both the citywide and for the downtown D area. So in the citywide data, what you see is, you see that drop off. That is a large part that we are not taking retail theft by an online report any longer. In D area, I do have concerns that it may be from a lack of reporting, and that is understandable when we don't come. Why would people report these incidents to us if they feel they are not going to get somebody's response? If it is because they are being told explicitly, don't make these calls, that's a problem that would be addressed in a disciplinary fashion. But there is no proof that that is happening, only anecdote. The situation that we have right now is that there appears to be a significant drop off in retail theft from what was being reported in 2023. One thing I'd like to do is, for most data points, I look at 5-year spans. And the reason I do that is because I compare the 5-year average to the current year, because I think that's most people's memory. But frankly, we're going to be running into challenges because of the pandemic. The pandemic is going to skew a lot of data in a lot of categories, not just crime data. So if we take a look at the next slide, please. These are retail thefts that go back to 2014 now. And what you see there is that, for example, the spike is still really clear for 2023 on the citywide, which is on everybody's left. But we look at D area and we realize D area used to be the driver of retail theft. The box stores existed at that point, but they either weren't reporting or they weren't experiencing it. The spike that you see on the citywide retail theft for 2016 is the spike in the D area, but D area falls off enough long before the pandemic and long before the issues that we're having with the priority response plan to a degree that makes it much less of a contributory towards the entirety of the city. And so that gives us a slightly different picture when we go a little bit farther back. Next, please. Here are some trends for D area. Again, D area is the downtown, and we know that we're having a lot of challenges in the downtown. The library, at the Marketplace Garage, on Buell Street, which is the street that runs in between the Congregational Church and the Methodist Church off of South Winooski Avenue. We've largely eliminated the problem. We have largely moved the problem that we experienced in City Hall Park away from City Hall Park. That's a win. but it's moved to other locations and it's causing, challenges and harms for other neighbors. These are, again, 5-year pictures for disorderly conduct, for trespass, for drugs, and then for arrest on warrant and violation of condition of release, which is the lower right-hand corner. That spike is really striking and shocking. Next slide, please. So this is drugs going farther back to 2014. And in the PowerPoint, as opposed to the PDF that's here, I was able to sort of make it go from just 2019 to 2024, and then show us actually 2014 through 2024, and get that picture. Looking at only the 2019, you'd think that drugs are off the chart and have really gotten crazy. Looking all the way back to 2014, we see that in fact reports of drugs were worse at certain points. Now, that's not an excuse. Nobody wants to go back to a worse time. And as I said, I believe that generally our collective memory is about 5 years. I don't think we remember how bad things were in 2015, 2016, at least according to this reportage. But I do think that it's worth noting that what we're experiencing now, as challenging as it is, as problematic as it is, as unacceptable as it is not completely unprecedented, at least not according to this particular type of data collection. Now, some of this, however, was that drugs also included marijuana. And we made a lot of marijuana arrests. We made a lot of car stops that included marijuana arrests. We made a lot of marijuana tells itself when it's happening in public, because you smell it and you notice somebody doing it and you're able to go and grab it. And the elimination of marijuana as an offense definitely affects this. And so it may too be that we are talking about apples and oranges when we talk about the drugs that are included in this. Next, please. This is trespass. This too, I think, is affected by a lot of different things. There are 2 linkable articles there about trespass ordinances on the marketplace and the ways in which the court approached those, and the city eventually had to back off from those ordinances. They were very good tools for policing, but they were determined to be concerning with regard to whether or not whether people's rights were being observed, particularly around due process about the effect of a trespass. If you are immediately trespassed for a long period of time, what is your due process to be able to object to it? But there too, trespass as an indicator of police activity addressing problems, which is how we do it. You're causing a problem in City Hall Park, we're going to trespass you. You're causing it on the marketplace, we're going to trespass you. Is down quite a bit from previous years. Some of that is that we don't have enough officers to do a trespass every time we would like. But some of it is the incidence of the kinds of crimes that are now, not then, applicable to trespass. Next, please. Now, this one is very striking to me. This is arrest on warrant or violation of conditions of release. And what makes this important is that in order to arrest somebody on a warrant, that person has to have a warrant. In order to arrest somebody for a violation of conditions of release, that person has to have conditions of release. That is a person who is not incarcerated, who previously perhaps would have been, and in fact probably would have been, for a variety of reasons. Changes in our law and our general posture around a deep desire not to jail people. This state does not want to jail people, and it passes laws that all lead in that direction. Furthermore, the courts themselves closed for 2.5 years, 2 years, and therefore nobody was getting jailed in those periods of time either. Instead, they were often being given long dates out for citation. Here's a citation. Instead of coming tomorrow or 6 weeks out, you're going to come 12 weeks out. And when you show up, there's still no room for any kind of prosecution. So oftentimes you just get another continuance with conditions of release and et cetera. And what happens when they are arrested for these crimes? We arrest people a lot for them. And I believe this will be a component of Nancy's presentation as well. A tremendous increase in arrest on warrants or violation of conditions of release. Next, please. Well, here's a part of it. And I do believe that this is valid information. This comes from the Crime Research Group. It comes from a recent report that they did entitled, I'm sorry, trying to find the link here. A research brief analyzing violations of conditions of release throughout the state by the Crime Research Group from April 9th of 2024. And that data is, I think this is quite educational. And this is not about the state's attorney. This is the court. This is the court deciding what is the court going to do with a person who's been brought before it for having violated conditions of release or having been arrested on a warrant. And the warrant is an insult to the court. In other words, you have refused to show up when you were supposed to show up and a warrant is issued. The court issues that warrant and the court is the one that determines what to do with that warrant. So I object that this is somehow something about our prosecutorial partners. There's something else going on here, and it is a huge problem. There is data on who's pled guilty or who's pushed to a guilty plea, and it's the smallest in the state. There is data on the totality of either dismissed or nolly as a percentage. Of course, Chittenden is going to have higher numbers than everybody else. It's got much more, many more people and much more throughput with regard to case work. But it still has by far the highest percentage, with the exception of Orange, which is just under it at 91. But the rest is quite different than, and this makes a difference. This means that every time an officer interrupts somebody or finds somebody who is known to have a warrant or is determined to have violated conditions of release, an example being, we arrested somebody this morning who is not supposed to be in the city of Burlington, and he was in the city of Burlington. We arrested him for that. What happens to him when he is brought to arraignment? Don't come back to the city of Burlington again. That person should be jailed. That person is not obeying the rules of the court. That person is not obeying the rules that are designed to prevent that person from harming others. And if we initially say, we're not going to jail this person because we're going to give this person a chance to behave on his or her own with explicit rules about that behavior. And that person then breaks those rules and shows him or herself incapable of following those rules about behavior, that person should be jailed. But we're not seeing that. In fact, we're not even seeing any percentage of that. We're seeing the highest percentage of nothing and then being released again with new conditions, and at times conditions that are dropped because they couldn't meet the previous conditions. We've had instances in which judges have said, oh, that person couldn't meet the no alcohol condition. It's obviously difficult for that person not to be prohibited from drinking alcohol. So I'm striking that condition and releasing them again, but now they can drink. Well, if drinking was a problem the first time, why is it no longer a problem? It's merely so that we don't jail. Next, please. Who do you call? There are a lot of questions about how you call and how you get in touch with the police department and what we do for that. So this screen shows a number of that. It's 911 if it's an in-progress emergency, if it is a crime or a recently committed crime, that's what you should be doing. There is a direct line and there's a phone tree on the following slide. You can use online reporting for a small number of incident types. We want to limit the number of incident types to what is explicitly stated in the priority response plan. And then there's a drug tip line, which we talked about before. That's for any kind of narcotics activity that doesn't involve an immediate safety issue. So if you see drug activity like hand-to-hand or sales, that's the drug tip line, because those are priority threes that we're not going to respond to whenever we have any kind of call volume that's going on. But an overdose is not a non-life safety or a narcotics activity. An overdose needs a response. Yes.
Is retail theft connected to drug activity?
It often can be. I mean, certainly many people commit retail theft for the sake of beating narcotics habits. Others do it for the sake of criminality and for money and sale, and then other people do it for thrill.
Do you know of 5 Avenues? It's an online thing.
No.
So 5 Avenues started maybe like 6 or 7 months. It showed up in my email. And basically what they do is they tell you in your locality, what police activities have happened. I get 1 to 2 every single day about the Shelburne Road Shopping Center. And so what I'm wondering about,
How do you know?
I guess they check all your stuff that you put out every day.
Maybe
Maybe
we don't print that.
I don't know how they know.
Yeah.
But I also live on Bell Street and I watch people run by my house with like their arms out like this.
Yeah.
And occasionally I have to say something to them because I just can't take it anymore.
Sure.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm very careful. I do it on the porch, and I don't do it often. But I'm just wondering, if we're making a mistake not to nip that in the bud. And I know we arrest people, they are on the street the next day. I understand that part too.
I think we're making a tremendous mistake not to nip things in the bud. Nipping things in the bud is the absolute crux of broken windows policing. You stop the small stuff before it turns into the big stuff. And it's remarkably effective. It's been shown to be effective over 30 plus years of law enforcement. and policing data, and we don't have the ability to do it. We don't have enough officers to do it. We don't have the ability to sit and respond to those kinds of cases in that way. The way in which, Commissioner Bill Bratton did it in New York City, in the transit system, which is where it first really worked, and Malcolm Gladwell wrote the first tipping point article before he turned it into a book, was about the transit system and what happened there. And that was a recognition that if you arrested people for fare evasion, you were going to prevent robberies. Because there wasn't a mugger in the system who went in lawfully. No mugger pays to get into the system and then mugs. So every time they arrested for fare evasion, they got some people who were merely fare evading, maybe even some who honestly couldn't afford the fare, and that's the only way they could get through this. I think that's an incredibly small portion of it. I think it was largely people who just didn't care because there had been no consequence, and people who were actively there to commit worse crimes. And instead, they found guns on fare evaders, they found pattern robbers among the fare evaders and muggers, and that was how they did it. You start with the small stuff and you get the big stuff. And we're missing out on that right now.
That's why I'm trying to make the connection between theft and also drug abuse.
Yeah. Although part of that issue too is that we don't think of drug abusers in our current context as the criminals. We think of them as victims of a malady. And we believe that the best way to address that malady is through treatment and other means and not through enforcement. And so even if we were to make more and more retail arrests, there is going to be a tremendous Venn diagram overlap between people who are in the throes of substance use disorder and people who are stealing at retail level. Retail theft level.
Right, one other thing, Chief,
Yeah.
because you did mention this, you don't respond to if there is a drug activity going on unless it's crime in action, which is going to impact other people. And I think I actually would piggyback that with the retail stuff.
Yeah.
Because as you know, I have made many calls
Yeah.
about drug activity. And I think users are usually present along with those who are selling them drugs. Because I've witnessed it. It's not, in fact, it's very difficult when you're actually watching it play out. You know this better than me, that how that transaction happens. So that's another reason to have resources, or if an officer even drives by, you can see people storing away. You know, it sort of disrupts
Yeah.
that cycle.
Yeah.
And as you know, geographically, that cycle can become established in one place, right? So that's something to also think about as we get more resources.
Yeah.
Is to make that a priority. People are calling you and saying, you know, and 911, look, I know there are people doing drug use right in my driveway, it's my call work. That's something perhaps in the future we can respond to.
We did for 40 years. That is what we did. We would respond to those kinds of calls. Right now, we just can't. We do proactive work on it when, for example, officers on the marketplace, Lieutenant Mike Henry is really good about getting his team to be out there and attempting to interdict and interrupt people who are open air using. We just did a major operation on Buell Street, which is where we've had a huge number of crimes. We had police presence, we had a chase on foot. We arrested 2 individuals who have long histories, including previous narcotics arrests from search warrants here in the city. One of whom had been told to stay out of the whole state of Vermont. And yet here they are again, not incarcerated and continuing to deal. But we put a lot of resource into that. Our narcotics unit did a large operation today. So we are out there trying to make that kind of thing work. On a day-to-day, shift-by-shift basis, the ability to respond is extremely limited owing to the fact that 5 officers, sometimes it doesn't even start at 5, it's 3 or 4 because people are on vacation or on training, quickly gets eaten up to the point where we have very little available. Next, please. So these are just some maps of how dispatch call intake works, and I'm not going to go through them here, but I encourage people to do so if they want to sort of understand what our dispatchers do. Next as well, please. Thank you. And all the things that dispatch has to do. I do think that at times when we look into concerns about dispatchers, we find, I have found problems. There are dispatchers who no longer work for the Burlington Police Department because of things that they have done. There are, including, for example, that case 2 years ago when a dispatcher basically responded to somebody reporting a vehicle on the bike path by saying, I can't send you anybody, we've been defunded. That dispatcher no longer works for the Burlington Police. And I will continue to exact that kind of discipline and hold people accountable for the things that they do. But oftentimes when I listen to what people are saying and compare it to the complaint that was made, what I hear a certain amount of curt business-like tonality from dispatchers who are harried and working hard and are not sufficiently comforting, but that is not part of their job. In the best case scenarios, it can be. It certainly can be, depending on how much bandwidth they've got or the nature of the call in front of them. But it is not their job to assuage people's concerns about things that people find unpleasant but not criminal. And it is their job, in fact, to differentiate between what is unpleasant or makes people uncomfortable and what makes people unsafe and what is criminal. And so that is a component of their work. And when I find that they have not violated that part, and they have not been rude in ways that are understandable as that, I will not necessarily hold them. There's nothing to hold them accountable for in those kinds. But I understand very clearly that the public wants a little bit more of that kind of sensitivity. But I don't know that that's the dispatch is where you go to get that. Next, please.
Commissioner Rao, you do have a raised hand from Commissioner Cox, who has unmuted herself.
Go ahead. Sorry.
So I just have a question, and I had read the slides like before tonight, and so I'm not sure if it's on the previous slide, but there was some place where the dispatcher asked for the birthday of the person of the reporting party, whether it be a witness or a victim. They asked for the birth date of that person, and I didn't really understand what the purpose of that was. I know other agencies don't ask that. They ask for like location, nature of whatever the distress is. But it was odd that I think that asking for someone's birth date.
Well, all of those are components of the information that we track in Valcor, and other agencies do, I believe, ask for that. Maybe not every single time, but they do, because that's a field that has to be filled in order to have a fully complete identification on someone. And so people do make anonymous calls and refuse to provide those kinds of information, but the ask is always going to be there when there's time. Nobody's going to be asking you asking a caller for the caller's birth date when the caller is saying, I'm being, attacked right now. There's someone in my home. Send help right away. That's not the time to be asking for a birth date. But if there's any lack of that kind of urgency, those are all information fields that we are required to fill out. Many of the complaints about the online reporting, for example, is about the laborious amount of information that goes into it. All of that and more is required of a police officer if the police officer comes to fill that out for you. So if you make a vandalism report, which is still something that is reportable online, and you are frustrated by all the fields of information that have to go in, you should know that that is much less than what the officer has to enter. And if the officer were to come and do this vandalism report in person, because when you call, there are 5 officers and they're all available because at that moment, just nothing's happening in the city, that officer has to do much more in order to fill all that work out and do that. And even when an online report comes in, we generally do follow-up work with the person to determine other aspects that weren't in the reporting. Because the amount of reporting and information that is required of us by the systems that we use and by the standards from the court and the things that we need to provide in the event that any of these things become evidence for something that will actually be, say, prosecuted, is tremendous. It's a huge amount. It's too much. And I've lost new employees who have felt that there's too much paperwork and they are overburdened by it. And we're so shocked by that. This is a teacher from Florida. He'd been a school teacher and he left because he said, I can't have that much paperwork. So that is a challenge.
I guess, Chief, my feeling is just that, and I think like that I'm not alone in this, that a lot of people think that the police, just in general, not BPD, but just police in general, are gathering information about people. I'm not sure why, what paranoid thoughts are around this, but it does seem that I still can't really understand like what the relationship is between a person calling, giving their name, giving their location, where they live, whatever the situation is, or where they're located at the situation, what their birth date has to do with anything.
Because in a state like ours, there are any number of people whose names begin with La and Lay, because we have a lot of good French Canadian names in our city, in our county. And there are a number of people who have the same names. And the way we differentiate between this Andrew LeClaire and that Andrew LeClaire is by asking their birth date. And we need to know which Andrew LeClaire called it in. Because if the incident turns into something more serious, and for example, there ends up being, let's say, God forbid, that there's an officer involved shooting that happens when the officer gets to that scene. We want to know who called that officer. And we want to be able to determine which Andrew LeClaire was it. And that part of that is the thoroughness of the information that's taken by dispatch. Or let's say it doesn't get as horrible as that with something like that, but we do want to know, what were the circumstances that led to this? All of it is information that helps us, it's not about keeping track of people proactively, because we don't do that. Golly, we don't have enough bandwidth to respond to actual calls for crimes, much less be proactively like watching what people are doing out in the world. But after the fact, yes, we do want to be able to know who was involved in this incident or that incident. And the more information we have, and much of that is taken initially by dispatch, the better we are able to respond to those incidents and investigate them and pursue them as necessary.
You do have DC
DC
LeBrac.
LeBrac wants to say something. LeBrac, go ahead.
Sorry about that. So if a cop shows up on scene, they're going to ask you your name and date of birth, where you live, and a phone number, because if you're calling it in, you're a witness, and the state's attorney requires that kind of information. If we file an affidavit, we put the incident and the case together. And also that's why dispatchers are taught to do that as well, because if your name and date of birth and all this stuff is already in the incident, then it's in the incident. If somebody says they don't want to identify themselves, they don't have to identify themselves, but we are taught from day one, name, date of birth, phone number, and how to reach you. When I first started, we still took social security numbers. We don't do that anymore, but all that's identifying information in case it is a crime and you're ever needed to be a witness, or you're the victim, or whatever it is. Like identifying information, that's just the way police work is done. We need to be able to know who we're talking to and be able to reach you again at some point.
Thanks, Wade. Next slide, please. Thank you. This is the non-emergency phone tree extension. It is a lengthy phone tree, that is true. And it takes time to get through, but that's because if you have an emergency and you don't want to be waiting for the phone tree, you should call 911. And we do want calls to go through 911. That's the best way. That's the most efficacious way to use the system when it's an in-progress incident or a crime or an emergency. But this is a list of all the other parts of the phone tree. Next, please. And these are the incidents that should be reported via online. Retail theft is not one of them. Larceny, various types of larceny we track is not one of them. But these are those that are. So next, please. So the big question is, what are we going to do so that we don't have to have an online report? We don't have to have the priority response plan. We don't have to have these things that people hate so much. Well, it's recruitment and retention. And so this is an update. This was our most recent, this photograph is our most recent graduation down on May 31st down at the academy. The young woman in the dead center was joining us that day. The rest are all officers who are already part of the team. Next, please. Working to rebuild. This is a slide that you've seen before, and it talks a little bit about the things that we've done. It highlights the fact that we hired more sworn officers last year than we had in at least 2 decades, probably more. Had a lot of impact in that. We've had tremendous success in regrowing our dispatch center, our emergency communication center. Next, please. This is an example of paid advertisement that we've done. You guys have seen this too. This was in the New York Post. Not my favorite tabloid, but it is the most read tabloid in New York City. And we did get bids. We got bites from this one. Next, please. These are our hiring patterns for sworn officers over the past, since 2010. And so it talks about averages. There is a lot of talk about this being a national problem, and it is. It is a national problem. It's a regional problem as well. But I will say that, you know, PERF, the Executive Research Forum, checked that on average, sworn staffing across its membership decreased 4.8% from January 2020 to January 2022. We decreased 25% during that period, not 4.8. And then the decrease, you know, started to arrest for the profession as a whole. It decreased another 0.9% from January 2022 to January 2023. We continued to decrease 9% during that time. So not 0.9%, 9%. The decrease that Burlington has experienced is unlike any other in the state, and it is greater as a percentage than almost most other agencies in the country. Certainly the large ones for whom there is media attention and data that I can get. I don't know. There may very well be a 4-person police department somewhere that lost 2 officers and is therefore down 50%. That's possible. But any large agency that serves the biggest city in its region and is the premier agency for its region, none has experienced decreases like this. And the notion that it's a national problem or regional problem, that everybody's suffering through it, is a way of falsely taking comfort in the idea that it's happening elsewhere too. Next, please. Yeah.
My apologies to you. You do have Commissioner Cox with a question.
So I was just curious, particularly looking at the total in for the years preceding the pandemic, or as people think about it, preceding George Floyd, and et cetera. I'd be interested in seeing what years that the people left. So in other words, for 2018, you hired 12 came in, 4 still remain. And I was sort of interested, out of that 12, was there a mass exodus like in 2020, 2021, or are they trickling out each year?
I mean, no, obviously people departed prior to 2020, but I think that the headcount chart that leads the document shows pretty clearly where most of these people left. We lost more than 30 people from June 1st of 2020 through August of 2022. That decrease is where a lot of these folks left. Not all of them by any means. There were retention issues. There's always retention issues in policing. Policing is not for everyone. It's a very difficult job, and people join it. They don't make it through the academy. They don't make it through field training. They don't make it after a year or two. It's too stressful. They move, they leave. The officer that we lost in July, I did not expect to lose him, but his significant other did not get a job anticipated here in the region and instead moved out to Michigan. He left us to go to Michigan because he's going with her. That's not about us, and that's not about the profession even. He wants to still be a police officer. And I believe he had real potential to be a really good officer for us. He'd been a CSO for us. He'd been an officer for us. He liked this department, but things moved him along. And then there are other people who leave for other reasons. I do track it all, but it's sort of a pattern that is a little bit challenging. You can see a little bit more information in the next slide, which breaks down both laterals and recruits. So I separate out the numbers that are on the previous slide and instead talk about how many recruit hires we had. And there's 2 classes each year. You'll see one anomaly, which was that, there was an October class in 2021 because of the pandemic. But generally the classes are in February and August, and therefore we hire or onboard in January and July. That is why I met 4 new recruits yesterday. We are onboarding them for the August 2024 class. So they are not included in this, because this only goes through the 15th of July. And what this says is that we've only had 1 recruit hire in 2024, and we have now had 5 recruit hires in 2024. It also talks about 2 lateral hires, which is still our number. I'm hopeful to be able to get at least 1 or 2 more before the end of the calendar year. And we're working on that. Our averaging for laterals has improved somewhat. We hired more laterals over the last couple of years than we had in previous years, in part because we are trying hard to get people from far away to come to this agency. What we're not seeing as much of is laterals from inside the state, used to be that Burlington and the VSP were really the crown jewels, and officers in other departments who couldn't get here when they first started as officers, who couldn't get hired, worked their way, got a little bit of road time under their belt, and then tried again for Burlington and came here as laterals. It doesn't happen anymore. They don't want to come to Burlington if they're in the state because they've heard things and they know, they hear about what's happening. Our laterals have almost entirely been from far away, or officers who left us but returned because they found out it wasn't better elsewhere. But that's not the narrative that's there. So the narrative prevents us from getting officers from other places to try to come here, other places in Vermont to come here. But it didn't prevent officers who left us and went to other places and said, you know, this isn't as good. I like Burlington. I like what I get there, and returned to us. They too are counted as laterals.
What are you doing to shift the narrative?
Well, you know, we try to have good recruiting tools. We are working on some you know, materials about that. Sarah Tim is putting out stuff about the police department and how it functions and the different roles that we have. We certainly would like to get back in a posture of being able to do a little bit more community engagement. The challenge is, if I don't have enough officers to send to a retail theft, I can't send them to a community barbecue that we're holding. And so those kinds of things are challenging for us. But, you know, reversing the narrative, that is an ongoing question.
So the question, Chief, is, and this is a question, is, I know this is true for other professions, is people find the cost of living in Burlington to be ridiculous.
They absolutely.
And I have had students who were in criminal justice, for example, they, you know, if I talk to them like last semester, they are becoming New York State police officers and are interested in coming to Vermont. They laugh when I say, hey, you know, do you want to work for VPD? And they're like, well, but does that mean I can live in Plattsburgh and commute? I mean, they kind of joke about it. They didn't want to do it. The cost of living, that narrative has spread. And I wonder how you know, that's a larger issue than VPD.
Yeah, it's significantly larger. I don't know how to change the cost of living in the region. We do have people that live on the other side of the lake. We do have people that, you know, and you're not required to, I am required to live in the city. I'm the only employee of the Burlington Police Department who is required to live in the city. And I do, and I like it.
But they want to live in Burlington. They want to live in Burlington, but it's so
Work with, you know, we're working with Ronald McDonald. The Ronald McDonald House is currently housing one of our officers, one of our new officers who's going to be a recruit. And they're going to give him that room for the weekends when he's not down in Pittsburgh. And that's awesome, right? And we're grateful for that kind of partnership. It's through the Queen City Police Foundation. But, you know, doing that for all 4 recruits or buying our own apartments and then keeping them empty for 2 or 3 months a year and then filling them during recruiting and then, you know, empty again. Like, I would love to do something like that. When I was an actor and worked in California, the first gig I had in California was a dinner theater in San Luis Obispo, which is halfway between California, San Francisco, and Los Angeles. And they put us up. It was, you know, it was a little bit like indentured servitude because I gave them half my paycheck right back to live in the condo that they owned. But that was how I lived in San Luis Obispo. And the notion of moving there for 6 months for this dinner theater gig, and having to find my own housing would have been really prohibitive. But they did it. And the 2 people who owned the dinner theater also owned the condo in which I and, you know, 2 or 3 other people lived. Could we do something like that? Sure, we could. I don't know where I don't have the money to buy 3 units at you know, Cambrian Rise right now. And I don't think that Mr. Farrell is going to give those to me, as great a guy as he is. But would we explore something like that? Yeah. But where's the dough? And then honestly, if I had enough dough to buy 3 apartments, I'd start looking at fixing our building first. Yeah. And that's a far better recruiting tool, even than saying, come and work with us and we'll give you housing for the 6 months that you're in the academy. I think having the place nice is a better recruiting tool because when people walk into our facility, they kind of look around and they go, next please. Our emergency communication specialists are also part of recruiting and retention. And we have rebuilt that room. We've got 11 right now. We're authorized for 14. For us to have gone from 4 full-time employees to 11 is remarkable. And that is the work of Carolyn Irwin and recruitment coordinator Anand Baj. They've been really amazing. Next, please. These are our community service officers and a different way of looking at how we hire them. They've got the hire date and the separation date. I've got lists of who's current, and I also have the highlighted ones on the left-hand side are people who became police officers. They also have asterisks to see. Those are our CSOs who became police officers for us. And then on the other side, this sort of modified Gantt chart sort of gives you a sense of where they came in. I warn you that if you were hired at the beginning of a quarter, then that's where you start. But if you leave partway through a quarter, then the graphic takes you all the way to the end of the quarter. So I'm cheating a little bit and getting extra days out of some of these people, because if you were hired during it, I'm backdating you all the way to the beginning of the quarter. And if you were left during it, I'm backdating you all the way to the front of the quarter, and therefore, or the end of the quarter rather. And therefore, I'm earning a couple of days, but that was just how to visually represent it. Next, please. Our community support liaisons, incredibly important positions. I'm really proud of having created this program with Lacey Smith, and I find it to be the way of the future. I can't wait to have enough officers to be able to dual and deploy officers with the CSLs. What I envision is a system in which we actually have enough officers that we take officers who choose and volunteer for that assignment to work with the CSLs. And not all the CSLs, I wouldn't divide them all, but if we had 6 CSLs who are still doing exactly what they do today, and then 2 additional CSLs who were paired with 2 officers who for co-deployment teams, that's the way of the future that I see for them to do that work. It allows them to interact with people in slightly different ways, do kinds of things that we wouldn't necessarily send a CSL to do right now for safety reasons, but we could if there were teams that were paired in that. Next, please. Then now we just have some slides of our graduations. This one goes all the way back to 2023. We get great recruits. We had one who was such an admirable recruit. He was selected by all the other recruits to be the class president. That's the one who's speaking there. We have a young man who's a BHS student and also a Beach and Parks person. He was the youngest Beach and Parker we ever hired. We hired him during his senior year of high school. He went through Champlain College. Now he's with the BPD. Next, please. That young woman who's striding forward on the left, she was the top academic recruit, also had the top overall firearms score, terrific recruit. Then all the others in that class are there. We've already lost some of those recruits, unfortunately. They're not with us anymore for different reasons. One, the pace was way too much. This was too fast an agency. The other, as I told you, paperwork. Could not believe how much paperwork and process was involved in policing in general. And left to go back to Florida. Next, please. This was the most recent graduation. Noah Hua is not a recruit, he's a police officer, but he was selected by all the recruits in the 117th class to be the best teaching assistant. And I think that says something too. We send good people down to the academy to teach, to share the way Burlington works. And I'm proud of the men and women that get to do that. Noah's a great cop.
Pardon me, Chief, I have
Yeah.
a quick question. Do we do exit interviews?
We do.
When people are leaving? Do we have the data on that?
We do. We do.
Is that something that we could get access to?
So we promised them that we don't share it and that it's only for internal informational purposes and it's anonymous. But I have been thinking about how to take some of that out and anonymize it in order to have that data available. And we've been working on how we would sort of aggregate it in a way that keeps it anonymous but shares it.
I think it's a really good idea.
Yeah, that's a great idea because that's connected to recruitment.
Agreed.
That could be connected to
It
recruitment.
usually is, right?
Right, always is, right?
Yeah, definitely. Next, please. So again, this is just an example. When I gave this initially, it was on Thursday, the 18th of July. So 2 days, last Thursday, and we were at 66. But as of today, the 23rd, we're at 60. We're actually not at 69. We're at 70. I was incorrect. I thought the sergeant was leaving us on the 22nd, which was the same day that we brought in the 4 new recruits. But he actually is still on the books for another couple of days. So right now we're at 70, which is higher than we were at the beginning of the year. Yay, us! We've moved up 1 from 69 to 70. As soon as that sergeant departs at the end of this week, we will be back at 69, which is exactly where we started the calendar year. And that is incredibly frustrating. Next, please. This is what we got to try to reverse it. This is what reversed the drop. The drop did not reverse because the city council changed the authorization back from 74 to 87. The reversal happened because this contract was adopted, and we were able to start onboarding people with that. And you can see that in the graph that's on the second page of the document. But we offer, this is the best salary in the region, but it is not necessarily enough to take on those cost of living issues that people talk about. So, next please. That's it.
That's it.
So,
11% inflation. I mean, that's just, you know, like, and that's, to me, that's why I don't know what you're finding in your exit interview. That
Yeah.
could be one of the things that perhaps we can work on in the future.
I have not seen cost of living mentioned in exit.
Oh.
I have seen, I have largely seen, the bulk in that large first period of really precipitous decline in headcount was lack of support and a feeling that the city didn't want what I provide as a police officer. That was the recurring theme in all those. More recently, as I said, we had other things, too much paperwork, too much process, et cetera. So.
Do any of the commissioners have any other questions? I know Councilor Grant has her hand up for a while and this is her speak. Anyone else has any question for the chief? Okay, Councilor Grant.
Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, I scribbled that. I want to slander. I've been in positions too many times to count where I provide information that might be ahead of the curve, meaning that maybe what the department knows internally hasn't caught up yet, for lack of a better, I know there's a better way that I can say it. But I'm going to use the box stores as an example. I was pushing pretty relentlessly about not only the issues with online reporting for our downtown retailers, but also for our box stores, because I happen to meet 3 of those quote unquote professional loss prevention staffers. The stores, and we've talked about this before in a previous meeting, the stores, Home Goods, TJ Maxx, and Sierra Clothing, they're all under the same corporate umbrella. Each one of their loss prevention, the heads of their loss prevention divisions came to Burlington, trying to meet with you and the then mayor, trying to find out what was going on, because they weren't getting any responses to what they were submitting. And they were seeing the same things our downtown merchants were seeing with regards to high levels of retail theft, with regards to people doing drugs on their property, in their bathrooms, leaving needles in their bathrooms. They were seeing the exact same thing that our downtown retailers were seeing. And yes, maybe they were having more because they were simply bigger stores. But it didn't mean that what they were reporting that was happening to them wasn't happening. And I am appreciative that the department finally deep dived what was coming in online and realizing that there was a problem and correcting that. But there was this period of time where that wasn't being listened to, despite the number of times it was being brought up. And I don't think it's appropriate to say that, oh, they have professional loss prevention staffers. These are still businesses that were being robbed as a result of people suffering from SUD and people taking advantage of those individuals. So I think we have to, again, watch our language and how we talk about people who are victims of crime, no matter how large their businesses are or how small their businesses are. So eventually the department realized there was an issue with online reporting, and it wasn't acknowledged for a while. And I am telling you that you've got another issue that people are being hung up on, people sometimes in person, they're being told not to call regarding retail theft. Now, why are they going to want to file a complaint when they're being treated that way? What would make them think, and I would love it if the police commission to get out there and do some public engagement and let people know it matters if they file a complaint. And worse yet, a business feels like if I file a complaint, they're going to know that I filed a complaint, and then they're really never, ever going to show up. And it's like, we can't get out of this vicious circle. I cannot tell you the people like, don't say I told it, don't say I told him, you know? I am the Central District City Councilor, Wards 2 and 3, downtown businesses, and I've been in the South End and other parts of the city because I am the chair of the Public Safety Committee. I am getting earfuls in ways that you don't fully understand, or if you understand, you don't respect. And it is a problem. I sometimes feel, especially when I talk about better ways to handle things, especially around community engagement, because I understand that officers can't be doing specific community engagement, but you do have a PIO, and there's ways that we can use the PIO for community engagement, and there's ways that we can do it. I mean, if I read one more article about policing and recruitment and retention and the importance of social media, and I look at how we are not utilizing that, that is a problem. That is a problem. And it is a real matter of respect. You know, it's slander. It is not slander. You are having a problem you don't want to acknowledge. And this is what hurts to the department. This is what makes people feel abandoned. I'm not gonna, so I'm gonna leave that there. We have examples of catching up on issues before, and I'm gonna ask you to really think about that and how people move, because you show data that shows this reduction in retail theft, and that is not the case. And now we have people moving differently in the city. You've got a group of people that decide that maybe they want to take things into their own hands, quote unquote, vigilantes. You have the business.
I'm sorry, we actually are already up to 7:30, and we have a couple more presentations for tonight. Thank you so much for your comments. And thank you, Milo. I think we will move to the next agenda item, which is the Burlington Police Department Annual Report presentation, followed by questions from commissioners. Nancy Stetson, who's a senior policy and data analyst in the city of Burlington, is here. And Aaron's recognizing Aaron. Hi, everyone. From behind you. So, are you going to join or?
I only have maybe 2 minutes of very brief comments, so I'll sit back here quietly and listen, and then chime in at the very end of their time. That's
Sorry, I didn't see you.
Hi, I know, I don't know how you would have.
Okay, hi everyone. As Mr. Ruff said, I'm Nancy Stetson, Senior Policy and Data Analyst. I work at the Office of Planning. I have a handful of slides to walk through the much longer annual report that was posted online, and then I'm hoping to be able to take questions and go from there. We can go to the next slide. So just a little bit of background for this report. This report 2023 is the 4th comprehensive annual report that looks at police activities and racial disparities in those activities. Prior to the 2020 report, these data, there were some data reports written, but they were sort of ad hoc, like as people were interested in certain, you know, there was lots of traffic reports. These reports are built around a motion from the police commission.
I'm sorry, Lynn, if you can speak up a little bit for Commissioner Cox. She's only hearing parts of what you're saying.
Okay.
Tim, is it possible to remove the audio?
Boosting.
Okay, so these reports are sort of built off of this motion that was passed in January 2021. That's a list of data points that we were looking for us to report on every year. And then they also include sort of additional data points that we thought. The last piece I want to say is that to give credit and to limit your expectations, This report was not actually written by me. It was written by Zoe Portless, our previous analyst, who has been working with it. So I'm here presenting it. I can answer some of your questions, but there's limitations with the detail I know here. Oh.
Just trying to get back our video, which has dropped off.
You can go to the next slide. I'm just gonna walk through sort of the report. I'm happy to take questions as we go. So this first slide looks at overall incidents. I'm sure you know, but an incident is like a single police activity. It does not need to be a crime in order to be counted as an incident. What this shows is that incidents have been increasing, total incidents have been increasing steadily since 2021. There were 22% more incidents in 2023 compared to 2022. Still below sort of peak levels, but steadily moving higher.
My apologies, Nancy. Could you just hold on for a moment as I reconnect the owl that just dropped out on me? That's fine.
There's the owl.
Apologies, thank you.
Okay. So the other piece to know about incidents, that's highlighted here, is that the increase in incidents was a large part of that was driven by Kill Patrol. There are about 2,000 more Kill Patrol incidents in 2023 versus 2022. Another big increase came from suspicious events. Suspicious events are this really sort of vague categories that incidents are labeled as when they don't fit neatly into another category. So it's a little hard to like have a clear takeaway from that increase, but they did drive a fair amount of the increase. Some other incident types that grew a lot. You've heard about retail theft, overdoses increased substantially, and traffic. On the next slide, I'm just pulling out just priority one incidents. So priority one incidents were at the highest level in 2023 than in any other year. Priority one incidents are not necessarily the most serious types of incidents, but they are the most urgent calls that the police department receives. What I found notable about the priority one increase is highlighted here. So they increased by 121 incidents. Overdoses themselves increased by 178. So if overdoses had stayed flat, priority one incidents wouldn't have increased at all. And I know from looking at the current 2024 data that the police department is continuing to see high levels of overdoses this year as well. Next, looking at the people the BPD interacts with, the BPD has some sort of contact with nearly 19,000 unique individuals over 2023. You can, and there's a lot of different ways that someone can be captured in Valcor as someone who interacts with the police department, including caller, including victim, witness. So anyone that had any contact with the police department. Around 9% of those unique people were Black or African American, which is higher than the estimated share of the population in Burlington that's Black, which is around 5%. The other thing to note here is sort of the concentration of incidents. So the top 100 people who had the most contact with the police department were involved in over 4,000 incidents, or about 1 in every 6 incidents of the police department. On traffic stops, nearly doubled from 2022 to 2023. But as you can see from the chart here, they're still far below the levels that police department, regularly stop cars at in the past, especially earlier in the past decade. 15% of all drivers involved in traffic stops were Black, which is higher both than the share in 2022 and higher than the share of the estimated driving population. We estimate the driving population using the race of people who are involved in car crashes in Burlington, and that's about 9% of drivers.
What meaning do you make of that?
I don't have a clear answer to that. It's really disproportionate. I think in 2022, it had actually reversed. So the 3-year average shows like a closer level. Yeah, it's not clear to me. On arrests saw a substantial increase from 22 to 23 of 58%. As the chief mentioned, this did seem to be driven by these arrests on warrants. They account for around half of that increase. And also arrests for nonviolent charges also increased quite a bit. Arrests for violent charges were basically flat year-to-year. And so that's where the increase in arrests comes from. This table just breaks down the rates of arrestees, showing that 17% of all arrestees were Black, which is higher. This is comparing that rate to the share of the Black share of the person incidents, which is sort of like the non-unique people involved. And then next we have use of force, which again, use of force also increased substantially this year, over 50%. Force was used 314 times, which incident of force counts when force is used against one person. So there can be a single police incident that involves multiple uses of force. 23% of all subjects of force were Black, which is a higher share of both the person incidents who are Black and the percent of arrestees were Black, who were Black. The other thing to note is that around 10% of all arrests involve some use of force. So use of force does not have to happen at arrest, but of all the arrests, around 10% involve some use of force. So the report sort of has a hypothesis that part of the increase in the use of force it sort of goes along with the increase in arrests that we saw here. That is my entire presentation. But I'm happy to take more questions, and Aaron was going to just report.
I don't know. I was gonna let her speak. We have questions for you there.
First of all, can everyone hear me online? I'm happy to come up and sit next to Nancy if not.
We can hear you.
Okay. I can project pretty well, so I'll keep doing that, and if people can't hear me, let me know and I'll mute. So first of all, I think I should probably just introduce myself. Sitting behind you all. Hi, my name is Erin Jacobson, and I am Mayor Mulvaney Stanek's Chief of Staff. Nice to see all of you and meet you all. Thank you for everything you're doing. Really important work, and we really appreciate it. In terms of the mayor's interest in this data report, it's not to be directive to the police commission about what we're saying you should do with it. It's more about curiosity around what does the police commission plan to do with this data moving forward. And with that also, you know, we have some questions and curiosity around generally, what are the plans for the police commission and your annual report? And then connected to all of that is really about the work of the commission and how the commission can be supported, can be staffed in a way that allows you to do the work that you hope to do. And Tim Williams, this is in no way a criticism of you, but Tim, as you all know, like he supports this body with just a very small little sliver of this whole pie of work for the city. And I think there's just some questions that we should ask about what are the goals of the police commission, and then if you were to achieve those goals, what kind of staffing would that require? And that all connects back to data and this report and what you might want to do with it. And so with all of that, we just have questions and curiosity and want to make sure that the police commission is well supported in your work. And certainly the mayor cares very much about being data informed in our community safety response. So a request is that perhaps a police commission meeting agenda item could be a discussion about the commission's work in the coming months, and as it connects to the data report and as that connects to the kind of staffing and support the commission would hope to have so that you can achieve your goals. And that's it. That's all I bring today. It's just that request that we be able to have that kind of discussion at some point. And certainly the mayor would like to be a part of that discussion if we could join a meeting. I don't know if it would be your next meeting, but one in the near future.
Yeah, so I have a lot of detailed kind of analysis of the report. It's unfortunate that the person who wrote it isn't here because you can't answer them. But I will be providing that both to the mayor's office and all of us commissioners and also the chief. Because I think there's so much detail in here, and you did a very, very, very broad strokes, which I would have done too if I was in your shoes. But we really didn't get to the heart of some of the real issues that are inside the data around disparities and so forth. You know, we're still seeing discrepancies between whites and blacks in terms of numbers and so forth, and we need to get to that as a commission to continue to help the police department to move forward in that way. So I will hold that for now and share it with all of you. So that's one response to that at this point. And I also want to say that I think it makes sense to word in that way. And then to tie that to the kind of support we need, because I think right now we really need support. Not next year, but now. Yeah.
Yeah.
To really do the work that needs to be done.
Right. That certainly is what we've heard, and that's very understandable. And also keeping in mind that you're a body of volunteers. And so with that, being realistic about what is expected and also what can't be expected. And then with that kind of goal setting, how do we make sure that we're supporting your work?
Thank you. I think that's a great point. I think part of the challenge is that the commission's mandate has really been cobbled together in a very ad hoc, really slapdash fashion over the last 3 years. You know, my understanding, I think the things that I find that I spend my time are what the Nicole training was talking about in terms of procedural justice. You know, I understand that our core function and mandate, and that really came down through some of the documents that were developed, previous attempts at ordinance, the most recent charter change, is really looking at citizen complaints, working with the department, but more importantly, also holding them accountable, putting them through the paces. Are there internal investigations that really support the disposition that's being put forward? That was large focus of DD 40,
Yep.
which we talk about that a bit later, but in the CNA recommendations, 17,
Yep.
we could discuss that.
Great.
I think that, in my perspective, in my experience, has been really what the core mandate is. I personally feel a little uncomfortable as a group of citizen volunteers really trying to make suggestions about policing and tactics. When I was reading the report, and I think there is data showing that there's racial disparity, it may be a reflection of implicit bias. The chief has mentioned that publicly. It's something that's being looked into. I personally don't feel the commission is really positioned to do much with that data. I would put it back more on the department and the department boss, the city administration, as to what measures are going to be implemented around that. So I don't want to put a question to the question, but I do feel you raise an important point. As a body, what is realistic?
Yeah.
I personally have been observing a lot of, I don't know if mission creep is the right word, but people are a little bit scattered and putting a lot of, not a lot of concentrated effort into certain things. It's great to have opinions and sharing observations, but what can be really expected as a body? Looking at what other civilian oversight bodies do, it really is focused on complaints. So I know Councilor Grant suggested more outreach. I think that is something that, as the commission's role in complaints is becoming codified, DD 40 is an important step. I think the duty that is currently being discussed in the city charter is daunting, serious. That's a lot of responsibility. So, if we were to say we need resources to comb through this report and draw analysis, I don't know if that's realistic. I don't really think that's, at least not my understanding, what the purpose of the commission was, and where the city and the community is looking towards us to do. And I think it really is looking at complaints and transparency and accountability through civil society organization, that role with the police. So within that context, in terms of resources, I think that is probably something we might want to clarify right now. In terms of what the commission is doing in complaints review, there was some discussion about looking to hire a monitor. And that suggestion came, I think, largely looking at what Boulder, Colorado is doing for the monitor. But I think, we've had some discussion and the chief has raised some good points. Boulder is about twice the size of Burlington. Even looking for a part-time monitor is probably very challenging. I think what the work that's being done with the commission is trying to find, I think the main challenge from my perspective over the coming year is to find a way to replicate that role of the monitor within the commission. I fully take on board as not only a member of the commission, but a member of the community that we are facing a $14 million budget deficit. I would not, in good conscience, individually suggest that we need to hire one. I think we can do that. Mr. Williams' support is not required for that. The support that's being provided, the morning meetings, organizing, maybe helping minutes, things like that. I think that's relatively standard, as I understand from other commissions and bodies, and I think that's greatly appreciated and much needed. But I personally don't believe more should be asked or needs to be asked. What I do think is absolutely indispensable, That was put in the comments that I suggest shared with the Charter Change Committee. Stated in their meetings, it is included in the draft language. It is absolutely, they were talking more generally about ensuring that resources are.
Yeah.
there. That could be discussed year in and year out. What I think is absolutely indispensable is having independent. We cannot, we can't fulfill our duties without it. It's also absolutely, in my opinion, indispensable if we're going to sustain this commission as a body that does in fact look at complaints. And if the charter change is passed and it's through all of the legislative hurdles, if this body is going to perform the functions that are currently described in the charter change, it needs to have that level, that the independent counsel providing that level of professionalism and legal analysis. I think it's also vital to have that institutional memory and that sort of, just that skill set to help citizen volunteers, ideally more diverse body than currently is. And I'm not pointing fingers at others, I'm just as guilty, but the number of PhDs and lawyers on the commission does not at all represent the makeup of our community. We need to have pull in a lot of folks from a lot of different backgrounds. Claims processing is not something everybody does every day. So I think having a professional as sort of a pillar and sort of an institutional pillar is absolutely indispensable. And I would urge that the city does renew independent counsel's contract as soon as possible. So thank you for letting me share those thoughts.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Okay, one of the things that I do agree with Jack is, Mr. Keith, is the mission creep. I know we have a DPI office, which we have communicated with many times. And I don't know, I assumed the diversity, equity.
Oh, REIB. Yeah.
I use my own terminology, which is what I'm familiar with, right? It seems like that is an area where the department can really could reach out to that office, but I know that office is no longer viable, or,
The office, is just a much, smaller staff than it used to be. It still is its own freestanding department. It's a department of 3 with maybe hiring an admin assistant, bringing it to 4, but at the same time, also going through a big re-envisioning process, because I can just briefly tell you that the mayor's vision, for the REIB work, racial equity, inclusion, and belonging work, is for it to be integrated across city departments and not necessarily have that work being just siloed in one department or one small office, but how do we integrate it across all the work that the city wants to do for and with the community? So that work is happening. It's not that the REIB is dismantled. It's just more going through a re-envisioning process about how we do REIB work in the city most effectively.
Well, it seems like this report could be the starting point in that discussion, because clearly there are some issues that obviously we are all concerned about, and I know Chief had also talked about that he too is concerned about some of those issues. So if we are to continue with implicit bias training, et cetera, that has to then I'd be happy to see it being part of the department itself. I mean, somebody who could be trained within the department. I think that's where I would say, in terms of this report per se, and no, sorry, in terms of the mission that we have been tasked with, I do agree with Commissioner Keith. It's an amorphous. It has been amorphous, and I don't know how to sort of pin it down to a specific language as to what are our goals, and maybe we should. Maybe it's time has come that for the commission as a whole to come up with our sort of basic functions and pin it down and all agree upon. That could be done. Go ahead.
I think the word is purpose. You know, just being very clear. We've been talking about this for 30 years, right? Or maybe longer. So I think that's getting clear on that will help us with goals, and help us to have, you know, sort of tight meetings, and be more effective, I think, as a whole. Then you have to get specific and not just, you know, the purpose, but all the specifics, right? Which takes some time. It's like strategic planning anyway.
That could be part of our annual report as well, that maybe that could be a task that we can, some of us can take us, or we can take up collectively, is that we write a few ideas about what you just talked about, right, the goals, and then we can come up with that, not, and give it to you, I know you and I have talked about this idea, what is the commission doing, and, yeah, citizen complaint could be definitely an important part of it.
I think that's, I think what Jack said to me largely is the whole of it. You know, that in providing for our whole community, not just certain segments of our community, for a whole community, you know, kind of a space where complaints come in, they get adjudicated, we talk about them, and we follow that process. And to me, part of that process too, from this report and the details in it, is looking at things like racial disparities. And we might have a little different opinion, I'm not sure about that, you know, but that to me is a key aspect for our whole community to move forward.
But that goes beyond though.
It's accountability.
complaint, but
But it's accountability,
Not necessarily.
in my mind.
No, I'm saying it is part of the
Yeah.
complaint. I think, you know, first, you know, we don't actually adjudicate. We, you know, and again, it's a very nuanced, evolving process. You know, really, at least from my perspective, what we're looking at as the internal investigation, does it support the finding of disposition, whether primarily to exonerate an officer? So we're not, you know, it's really kind of, we're not adjudicating, we're not taking a decision, you know, it's more, was due diligence done, doesn't support, because if you exonerate an officer, you're saying that behavior is a model for other officers. This complies with the rules and policies of the department, and this is what the community can expect. So, you know, so through that process of kind of looking at complaints, if you are looking at trends and things like that, if you are observing things that may point to an implicit bias, I think it's important that that comes out of the process. What has been, from, again, my perspective, a bit challenging is when you look at the complaints, it can be, you know, you don't want to frame it necessarily as litigation, you know? It's, you know, there's a winner and a loser, zero-sum outcome. You know, what becomes a bit problematic is if you are observing things that are trends, it may not be a violation of policy, but it may be something that is of concern to the citizens. How does that get discussed in a constructive environment? Once you're in the realm of a complaint, everything goes into executive session. So then it's really closed off. And so if there are trends and things, how can that be discussed? Who is the body? I have talked to some city councilors. I don't think it's clear to them. You know, where would you bring something, for example, that, you know, there may not be clear evidence, but what if it's somewhat anecdotal, a little bit subjective or even qualitative? But if we are hearing something, how does that become addressed? It's difficult to do that in an executive session when you're looking at the very narrow confines of the complaint. Also, complainants aren't always looking at the bigger picture. So, you know, it can be, you know, like, you know, it's, first of all, it's a vital duty.
Yeah.
I think in terms of transparency and accountability, and it's, you know, again, I would invite anyone to look at some of the basic Nicole training, why it's beneficial. I think a lot of good comes out of it. But again, it can be broader than just that, looking at a complaint as it's stated and within the confines of the rules. There are other things that maybe could be discussed. We don't have the form, the voice, or the process for that. That is something that I think we could discuss. But again, I may be somewhat biased, but I do really believe the core mandate and function of an oversight body is looking at complaints. And then how we can take that.
Yeah.
And I would say that would really take up most of this body's time for a year. You know, it's establishing, really trying to stand up something of an institution. And that is, that's a process.
Yeah.
That's something that I don't think we can do as an isolated body. And again, I don't really know what the forum is or what the process is. I would welcome the opportunity to discuss further with the administration. But again, when we are dealing with personnel matters, they're highly confidential. So there are certain constraints that we need to work within, but it can be an enlightening process. It can benefit, I think, you know, both the department, the administration and the community as a whole. So, but I, you know, again, that is a lot of work. Going through this is pretty dense data. And I do work with data a bit in my work, but telling the story is a whole nother animal. You know, it's one thing to have just these data points, but what do they mean? What do they tell us? So I think we are seeing some data, which is of concern. I think my question, and we obviously spent a lot of time in this, but yeah, what would be the measures? Is there things that the chief and the administration are discussing or avenues that might be explored and looking at some of these data? Are there issues of implicit bias and could they be addressed? That would be one question I have from the data. I don't have the answers. I will just say that. I don't. The other thing is, you know, we've had a long discussion this evening about the priority response plan and other things. I guess the question is too, how could this data, because I am not a law enforcement person, okay? And I would not sit here and really suggest to the chief how to police tactics. But I guess the question is, can this data inform things like staffing, responses, things like that? So that's, I guess, the question I have is, I would first commend the city for doing this work. I think that as last year, the data is really impressive. The level of analysis is really, you know, really top flight. I mean, yes, I mean, it's fabulous. But what do we do with it? You know, it's great to have data. What do we do with it? I guess that's the question.
Right. And that's our question. What do we do with it and who does what with it? Which keys back into that question about what are the roles and responsibilities of the police commission, and how can we make sure you're well supported to do that work? And that reminds me very quickly, because I really know that I was supposed to be on like 3 minutes of your agenda this evening. I didn't respond to your inquiry about the attorney contract, but I did speak with Chair Rao this afternoon about that. The administration fully agrees you need legal support to do your work. And the only question is, in terms of an independent contract with outside counsel, just making sure that what that person is doing is really the work that the city attorney's office can't do because of conflict. So that means that anything that is to do with like disciplinary matters should be outside independent counsel. That is not to say, though, that you can't get other legal support for other matters from the city attorney's office too. So just making sure that there's that delineation, but there's really no question about whether you will have that kind of legal support that you need.
Right. Thank you. I think that something council would have a separate independent body. You know, police department, regional administration, we're kind of doing our work, analyzing things, and working in having this independent counsel who's been doing a great job, break down those and give us direction.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And I just think there still could probably be a little bit more clarity of that individual, knowing that we do also have city attorney's office.
No, Haley is great.
Yep.
We use her all the time.
Great.
So, and I think they work, our independent counsel works great with her. So it's a good team.
But here's the rub. The rub is that I would like to know whether we are a citizen oversight body or not, or we are what the charter says, that we could also be a bridge and work in collaboration in some instances, not all, with the department. And I'm not on board with everything, but I think that's a clarity that, I mean, we can write our goals, but I think that's something the mayor and the city council also has to direct us to a certain extent. Because on one hand, if we are saying, okay, you know, the council, the independent council can help you in a very narrow way, but you cannot ask the independent council for matters that relate to citizen complaint that can be perhaps addressed by the city attorney. And that independence is lost. So I think we can write our goals. I probably would not agree with some of the fellow commissioners, but we can write our goals. But I think this is really a matter of political will from the city council and the mayor, rather than us sitting here kind of expected to do, you know, kind of now suddenly expected to tell the PPD exactly, you know, what to do with this data, or we can make suggestions. I have to say, I'm not going to say that we cannot make some suggestions, but I think some of that has to come from the will. What can the city council and the mayor's office is willing to give us in terms of authority and in terms of our scope?
I would say, being now my 4th year on the commission, that,
Senior.
yeah, almost got X'd out completely. I would say that there have been multiple instances where it was very difficult to do the work that we're supposed to be doing. Without saying too much, I'm saying everything. So that was why we pursued an independent counsel. So we had someone that was working with us that could advise us specifically about the law in that particular situation. So we could move forward based on our own work around particular cases. Happy to chat later.
Right. And I didn't mean to just, you know.
No, it's okay.
This big
It's a good
conversation
conversation.
topic
It's a good beginning.
into this particular meeting, because it's not even on the agenda. I wanted to come and thank you, and also just kind of ask the questions around, well, we have this fantastic data report and all this really amazing data. What do we do with it? What does the commission do with it? And what are the roles and responsibilities of the commission, and how do we support that? I'm hoping that could be a topic of discussion at the next meeting. The mayor would really love to be a part of that discussion. I really appreciate all of your thoughts, really all of the work you're doing.
And I would go back to you, Commissioner Keith, and say that I also believe that data is our friend. And that it also provides a context from within which particular incidents lie. So I think, you know, data is also really important as a tool for us in general in our work. And I agree with you that our primary responsibility is twofold. It's doing the work of the complaints and holding the role of accountability as we can. And that's another reason why I think it's so important to have an outside counsel.
Chief, do you have any thoughts about this report? Do you have any comments, or how do you see your department moving forward?
Yeah, so you know, when I first got the preliminary pieces of it, parts of it concerned me. I talked about those in the previous police chief's report. I think the one in, I want to say May, but it might have been April. We've taken steps to look into what it is with particularly traffic stops. That's the one that is the most concerning to me. You know, I note, for example, that yes, it is true that use of force is up 50% as a number, but that's less than arrests are up, which is 58%. And I personally think that we have a tremendous number of redundant means of examining force to ensure that it's lawful and proper. That the increase there doesn't concern me, the increase in number. The disparities do concern me in all of those. I mean, you know, we have a city that's 5.2% Black and crash data that suggests the driving population is 9.1. And then of all interactions, it's 11. And then of all traffic stops, it's 15%. And of all arrests, it's 17. And of use of force, it's 23. So that is, there's changes there. But I also recognize that in the granular ones that we examine, I see reasons for example, those traffic stops. And I've looked at every single traffic stop involving a person of color. And I've only found a tiny handful of them that appear to me to be what would have formerly been called contextual interdiction stops. Stops that are designed to sort of get at whether or not this person's trafficking. But I also have to say that interdict at a time when we want people, like when you call and not you, Commissioner, that's not fair for me to say it, but when a person calls about drug activity that is happening outside of their house, and there's a person that is selling out of a car, and the police pull up and that car drives away, when that car decides to make another turn without using a turn signal, that is a prime opportunity to figure out who's in that car and whether or not there's drugs in that car. And that is pretextual interdiction. Now, we don't do it anymore, at least we're not supposed to be doing it. But if people want us to be able to drill in as many ways as possible into the kind of narcotics outdoor sale and use that we are seeing, that is a tool for it. And that may end up having certain kinds of disparities involved, particularly around who sells narcotics in our city. But I don't want it because I don't ultimately think that the bang is there for that buck. I don't think that it is the best way to do it. And I've been clear about that. To the extent that it is happening again after a couple of years where it really was not, I'm looking into that. What I will say is the biggest concern for several years had to do with searches, not with stops in and of themselves. And searches are practically zero in this year. I think there were only, 1 or 2. So that remains a place where we really have experienced and seen a lot of success. Well, what I am looking into now, the next stage for me is to determine whether or not the Department of Justice's needs are met with regard to stops. And there are things that, did the officer introduce himself or herself? Does the officer provide information before asking the driver for license or insurance or registration? Does the officer ensure that a detention is no longer than necessary for whatever action is being taken place? Does the officer answer questions that the citizen have, including explaining options for traffic summonses if relevant? Does the officer provide his or her name and badge number when requested? Does the officer apologize and or explain if he or she determines that the reasonable suspicion that initially created the stop was unfounded after further investigation? Those are the 6 things that the Department of Justice says make for a legitimate and proper vehicle stop. And on some level, if that is being followed in every single one of these stops, that is the primary issue, as opposed to whether or not there are disparities in the outcome of the stop, which could be driven by other kinds of things. If the officer.
So can I suggest
Sure.
then,
Yeah.
I wonder if somebody in your department can actually look at some of these stops and look at the body worn camera footage, right? And then have some understanding if those mandates are being followed or not, and maybe report back to us at some point, maybe before the next report. I would do it before the next report is because we want things to improve, or if not improve, then at least we want some assurance that what you are doing, the way you're describing it to us, is the correct way that things are being done, right? It could go either way, right? It could be that you find out, you look at the body worn camera and find out everybody is following those procedures correctly.
Or we have orders who are not.
Correct. And you might even be able to identify certain officers, certain instances where the officer may need a little bit more guidance or training. I thought that whole implicit bias training that you did, I think it was like January a year ago.
Last year.
Yeah, I thought it was fantastic. And I wonder if there is time again to do that.
Yeah.
Right, refresher and with this new perspective in hand.
Yeah.
Right, and
That's very interesting.
I just think that could be, so you could do it in a way that's constructive, right? The idea is to do it in a way that it doesn't come across, say, hey, you know, this is some kind of a disciplinary action. It doesn't have to be. From all my training of DEPI, we call it, and being an advocate, DEPI advocate, in fact, the outcomes are very poor when you tell the officer or, you know, the employee and you did something wrong. The positive actually has a much more impact. So the question for us then is, how can we suggest ways
Yeah.
that it is a positive experience? How can you take the negative and turn it into positive? And that's what I'm struggling with. I don't know, Commissioner Comerford, you are also an expert in this. So.
I agree with you, but I would also like to ask that, I know that you didn't write the report, but the next time we have a meeting to talk about this, if you kind of bone up a little bit on, you know, the details of it, because I have details, and I need to have someone to respond to them.
Yeah, if you could send me
I'll send you my comments.
that would be great.
But I do want to talk about them publicly for our community.
Absolutely.
And one of the data points that I saw was missing was Hispanics. That was a racial category, and I don't know why that was missing. Is it because nobody was stopped who identified themselves as such, or the officer did not? And I don't know why that was missing. I was surprised by the fact that that was missing. Right, but that is an important demographic.
It may depend on on particularly which section you're talking about, like traffic versus arrest. It is recorded. But there are just points where the numbers get so low that they're either uninsured.
Do you have access to the person who wrote the report?
Not particularly. If there's a question that, cannot be answered, I can reach her, but
Shouldn't work for anything.
yeah.
Can we have access to the raw data?
We do publish the data online. So all of 2023 for arrests, traffic stops, and use of force are published on the online data portal that the city has, on like a roadway, incident by incident level. Unfortunately, we're still having trouble. We previously had direct access to the database through SQL, like a sort of automatic access. It hasn't been working lately, so there's been a delay. Usually we post that data every month, so it's very up to date. So that hasn't worked.
So the posted data is done as a PDF?
It could be a CSV, it could be, CSV, very machine readable.
Okay, all right, thank you, Nancy, thank you.
Thank you.
Karen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item 6 is review of May 2024 use of force reports. Any requests to review body-worn camera footage from any commissioners? I quickly looked at it. I have no, I myself don't have any requests, but no one else. Commissioner, oh no, sorry, DC LeBrack, I did get an email from him. He was on vacation and training, so he's a little bit behind on the other reports. Right? Am I quoting you right?
Yeah, I was at a 3-week training in Boston, and then I had a couple of days I had to use when I got back. Otherwise, I would have lost them on July 1st.
So you will get us the other reports, right?
Yes. I'm working on them right now.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Commissioner Cox, he may have a request.
Yeah, I was just wondering if it was possible that we get renewals on the body cam footage that was made available to us, but it's just made available for, I guess, 3 days. And that was like just a little bit too short of time. I looked at the 2 of the longer ones, but I wanted to rewatch a couple of sections, and then there were some shorter ones that I didn't see yet.
So I can send the other ones. 3 days is what, that's what I have to give you to look at them. I can always renew the 3 days.
That's what I'd like if possible. If you would please just renew them, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay.
Right.
By the way, I have some really good stuff to say about some of the stuff I saw, and what I wanted to do was to rewatch it, so I got the facts exactly right of what happened, but I've seen some really great stuff on there.
Commissioner Garrison?
Yeah, DC LeBert, I thought we had previously discussed about having a longer period of time to review the.
I talked to Axon, and that's what they have. They have 3, and the next one is like 30 days. And that's a long time for videos to sit out that aren't internal. The worry would be, and my concern would be, they're just sitting out there and someone hacks into your computer. If they have your evidence.com, then password in that hack, they can get into those videos.
I guess renewal is our option.
I talked to Axon to see if that was a thing that I could adjust, like in the days, but those are stock numbers that we get that they put in the program. When you buy Axon, like the number of days you can share, it's like 3, 30, 90. That's, and then
90 would work for me.
Right. So I think if we can send you a renewal, which is what I think Commissioner Cox is asking for.
Yep.
That would be great. And right now, it doesn't look like we have any requests for the May use of force report that you sent.
you can always send me an email with the incident number that you want, and I can send it to you. And I guess my question would be, if one of you sends it to me, do you want me to send it to everybody or just the person who requests it?
Everybody.
Everybody? Okay.
Okay, thank you. Item 7, which is officer commendations. We have quite a few, so I'm going to truncate them, just looking at the time and not read all the language.
We're almost done, honey.
And I mentioned the major issues. First of all, we want to recognize the work of Detective Corporal, who was injured last night. We wish him speedy recovery and commend him for his brave resilience work. And this is, Chief, I don't have the information. This is just from us, from me. First commendation, hey y'all, I just wanted to give you both a heads up that Katie went above and beyond on the X case today. I don't know who Katie is.
I believe it's Katie Mara, who is one of our CSLs.
Yeah, so Katie Mara, is one of the issues people don't get the names. Yes, she helped support the family and get the RFA approved, and that's super important, but even more impactful for the family is how Katie utilized and leveraged her resources with the PD by contacting a member of the drug unit who was working patrol at the time. In doing so, Katie was instrumental in getting Mr. X located, arrested, and lodged tonight, meaning that Y and her kids can sleep peacefully, knowing he won't be returning before he's arraigned. It is these impactful events with community members where CAP shines and where I hope people can truly begin to see this program's value and worth. Number 2, Sergeant Mellis has been patrolling our South End neighborhood for the past 2 days. And we want to express our deepest gratitude for his efforts to keep our neighborhood and kids safe. We have faced numerous issues for years, with Rice High School students and parents driving too fast. Sergeant Mellis exemplifies true professionalism, is clearly passionate about his work, and genuinely cares about the city. Hello, I wanted to let you know how impressed I was with Officer Parrott's interaction with both X and Y tonight. He was able to de-escalate both parties while maintaining his composure and help them come up with a temporary solution for the evening. He was respectful of both of them and listened to what they both had to say. Dear BPD, Y and I want to thank you for the restraint and professionalism you showed during the entire ordeal and his subsequent arrest. You have a few tools at your disposal during these tense and chaotic situations such as this, and I thank the officers of the department for handling this the way you did. I don't know what comes next for Y, but I'm thankful that no one else was hurt and he's still alive. Thank you. Hi, Chief Murad. I don't know if you remember me, but I'm going to skip all that. I'm writing to thank you and your officers who responded to a burglary alarm and attempted entry into the building tonight. The first officer to arrive was Officer Brown, followed by several other officers. The officers politely and professionally engaged the 2 individuals outside the building. then cleared the building and helped me to resecure the boarded up window opening. I was a bit shaken and did not get all the officers' names. Would you be able to share their names? I would like to send them all a thank you note that commends, unless somebody else has some of their commendations. Those are the commendations I have, and we wish the officer well who was injured last night. Please give.
Thank you. Yeah, the detective is, it appears right now, I mean, it was a very, very deep, and big, laceration, but it looks like there wasn't any tendon or nerve damage. And so, I think he's going to be okay, but it is pretty amazing. And, you know, the female victim suffered a very serious facial laceration. I've watched the body camera. It is remarkable that, frankly, it's remarkable that the officers did not fire. That really, I think there are many officers for whom that would have been the course of action. It would have been a lawful course of action. You know, this one put them in physical harm's way and had injury, and but it was something. It was really remarkable, and it is the zero hesitation that our detective showed in that moment was really.
Multiple injuries, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All from the knife. No, the suspect also beat the woman prior to using the knife.
All right, item 8, commissioner comments. Do any of the commissioners have any comments for tonight? I had a long comment about the budget, our police commission budget, which is at the current moment is 0, but I was quite, it was good to hear Aaron Jacobson speak to it eloquently, and looks like the city is making some efforts towards giving us resources. We do need resources. We do need somebody who will do most of the clerical work. It's not him is here for the meeting and that's it, but we need somebody more than that. So it seems like there is some effort, and we need everything there.
Yeah. Could you clarify the clerical work that you requested?
Yes, I do. I have a list of it. I haven't written it down, but if people want to include something else in it, I'd be happy to include. Requires management of files, onboarding of new commissioners, for example, managing our website. Those are some of the things that our clerical staff did. Also, our clerical staff kept track of all the citizen complaints.
No, that's
And
not.
but that was Mohammed did that.
No, that's done by the commission.
Mohammed, I know Mohammed did that. The commission,
I can assure you,
some commissioners did that, but I was there when Mohammed actually was taking in complaints and putting them on SharePoint.
I forwarded every, asked him on that SharePoint. It was not a heavy lift at all. It's something.
Well, it's, we can talk about that. We can talk about that in the executive session. I
Well,
think there is a lag.
Thing is, Republican, it's a statement. It is a matter of fact. That has not been a role.
Well, maybe it should be something that should be done, because the way I'm seeing it is that there is a lag. Okay, and there's a significant lag. For example, the last time we discussed citizen complaint was February, and it's July. And I think and I understand you've done a lot of work, Commissioner Keith, and I appreciate that. Okay, but I think what needs to be done is that we have somebody who will upload the citizen complaint on SharePoint as they come in, so that all the commissioners have access to that, not just me, not just you, all the commissioners have access to those. And, you know, so they're up to date, not just a day or two before we meet. There has to be some continuity to that. Okay, there has to be, it just, otherwise it becomes a lot of work a day before, not only for you, but at least for me, I'm speaking for myself, at the last minute going through all those complaints, right? So that's, I'm just saying, just for the sake of keeping up with the citizen complaint, I think that would be useful if we have some support in that area. And you're another one alone.
Again, think in terms of resources, uploading a document to SharePoint is a very simple process, one that can be done by, and has been done by. So we can discuss roles and responsibilities later.
Yeah, I think that.
But I think it's important when you're making a declaration of needs for support, that it is, clearly in line with what is being done.
Okay. We do need support.
Absolutely.
We are trying, I don't know how, we can sit here and tell the public, well, we can do ourselves. When realistically, we are actually not able to keep up with that. So, okay, any other commissioner comments? Okay,
Just a welcome to our new commissioner.
yes, I'll let the new commissioner say a few words.
Tell us about you a little, please.
Oh, sure. Well, my name is Robert Dufford.
Item number 9, the end of the day. Is there a motion regarding special findings? Commissioner Cox.
Yes, I move for a special finding that a premature general knowledge of the commission's hearing of grievances and complaints will clearly place the state, municipality, or persons involved in a clear disadvantage.
Could you say that about one more time, please?
Ha ha ha. I move for a special finding that a premature general knowledge of the commission's hearing of grievances and complaints will clearly place the state, municipality, or persons involved in a clear disadvantage.
Is there a second? Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Motion passes. Is there a motion to move into executive session?
Motion to move into executive
No,
session.
no, wait. She has to have the,
Oh, there's three at the same time.
yes, Commissioner Cox.
I move, based on the special findings, that the commission enter into executive session pursuant to 1 VSA section 313A sub 1.
Is there a second? Commissioner Garrison, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Motion passes.
Aye.
We'll now move into executive session and will
Recording stopped.
to the public meeting. Let's.